All right, welcome everybody. Today we have the mental health response team. But before we get started with this career event, I just want to do a little housekeeping. So over on the right, you're going to see our check-in QR code. Don't forget to check in. This is primarily for your counselors and your teachers so they know that you're at this event and not somewhere you're not supposed to be. And then over on the far left, we have great questions. So this is really helpful when you get a lot of information and you want to know, what to ask these presenters. So that'll be very helpful for you. And then we also have the evaluation form, and this is how you get the career credit for attending this. Again, be fully present, try to stay off your phone and participate. And then don't forget to submit your form. You should try submitting it right after you watch this, so all the information is fresh on your mind. Again, this is an evaluation that counts towards that career credit. So it is a requirement for graduation. I believe that is everything for this. If you feel comfortable turning on your camera, feel free to do so. You won't show up on the recording, but besides that, I think you guys are good to go.
Hi, good morning. My name's Heather. I'm a clinician with the mental health response team. This is my partner,
Tracy Hinkleman. I work for the Hillsborough Police Department.
So we're gonna first, before we start, just share a short video about our team.
And I'm Cody Harrison with Washington County Sheriff's Office, and I'm here to help you guys. I'm community outreach, and I'll share my info and I'll get that video started for us.
Hi, I'm David Huey. I work for the Washington County Sheriff's Office in the Patrol Division. I started working for the Sheriff's Office in 2015, and I've been with a team called MHRT, which is our mental health response team, for the last about 2 years. It's my favorite assignment so far. Traditionally, a patrol deputy is going to respond to a number of different types of calls for service that come in through dispatch. What's unique about my position with MHRT is we respond to calls specifically that deal with mental health or a mental health component. Some of the differences specifically are going to be additional training that MHRT or mental health response team deputies receive for crisis intervention training or other mental health first aid type things. A significant number of calls for service have to do with a mental health component, and where maybe in the past those things have been missed, we're recognizing them more and more every day as we kind of go on the road, and it helps us to de-escalate in uses of force when really we just use our best communication skills to try and de-escalate. Every deputy with MHRT rides around with a mental health clinician. So it's a master's level clinician that's staffed through one of our partner agencies, and we ride around as a team responding to calls for service that have to deal with mental health issues. So that could be folks just in crisis. Oftentimes it's people that are on their worst day, folks with a diagnosed mental illness. Some folks that haven't been diagnosed but are showing symptoms of, and their families calling them in. People that deal with addiction. Oftentimes that will lead into something that will be a crisis situation that we'll respond to. As an MHRT resource, oftentimes we're going to respond to specific calls. Some of those calls being suicidal threats. We get those fairly often, where people are just on their worst day and they don't see their way out of the hole they're in. We'll respond to overdose calls. So those can, again, be linked to either a suicidal attempt or just folks who've just kind of taken too much of something. Either it's prescription or it's an illegal drug. We work with a lot of folks who are dealing with a diagnosed mental illness like schizophrenia or bipolar or mood disorders. And so with the help of my clinician, she has a lot of access to other resources that I might not see on the deputy side. So we work in tandem, and it works really well as a team. One of the things that makes our team unique, again, having that clinician in the car, is that we have the opportunity to read our situation as we're walking into it. So each call is different in the characteristics of the call for service. But for example, I might have a 17-year-old girl who just went through her first breakup and she's suicidal. I'm probably not the best person to talk to that client, but my clinician might be. On the opposite side of the coin is I might have a male veteran who just doesn't want to talk to a female, and I might be the better person. So we have to kind of read those calls in an instant and figure out who the best person is to relate and build rapport with that client. As the mental health response team, oftentimes we can do a hospital diversion, where we'll come in as a unit and we'll be able to see something that maybe that the traditional patrol deputy just isn't quite seeing yet, and that the hospital is a better option rather than taking someone to jail. MHRT is a unique team with our Sheriff's Office in that we have the ability to ride with the clinician. It's been a fantastic attribute. It's one of our many special teams. If you want to hear more about it, or you want to see what other special teams we offer, check us out at joinwcso.com.
So I've been with this team for
Law enforcement agencies are trying to work on ways to respond.
Sorry, here, we'll stop share.
Okay. So I've been with this team for a little over 3 years. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I have my master's degree in social work. And then the process to become licensed takes 2 to 3 years. So I've been in this field for about 10 years now. I went to college and then took a little bit of a break and then decided to go back to get my master's. My goal initially was to work with veterans. I'm actually a veteran myself. So I wanted to do outpatient therapy for veterans, but I kind of fell into crisis work. And yeah, I've been with this team for 3 years. Prior to this, I worked for the Washington County Crisis Team, which is a similar job to this one, except they do not ride with police. They respond to people in crisis as well. So yeah.
I guess it's my
Yeah.
turn, huh? So you'll notice from the video that he talks about deputies being part of this team. A big change occurred late last year where Washington County invited outside agencies to join, and Hillsborough Police was the first agency to participate. So I'm actually the first officer on this team, and I've been with them since March of this year. So I'm still fairly new, still learning every single day what I'm supposed to do, what she's supposed to do, and how we're supposed to work together. So it's a very dynamic day in and out for us. We seem to match up pretty well. I've been a cop for 14 years. I started August of 07, but I've been with the department for almost 17 years. I've been mostly patrol. Actually, all 13 years that I was on before this team was all patrol work. But I can be on the bike team. I did peer support for 5 years. I'm looking at maybe doing FTO later after this assignment is complete, maybe schools afterwards. But that's almost 4 years down the road. So I'm enjoying every single day that I'm here at this assignment. Day to day, generally what Huey said, I mean, we monitor calls in the queue. My MDT, I put every agency up on my board, so I'm aware of what calls are pending and what calls are active, and I'm constantly scanning for any calls that have a mental health nexus or component, or any of those dynamic calls that are suicidal threats, as he talked about. Generally, we respond to county calls. I'm able to jump onto Hillsborough calls quickly just because that's where I'm from. And we're starting to work with other agencies just to ask to be on their calls before they even respond, just to help out.
Yeah. So typically we respond to calls that come in through 911 or non-emergency that have a mental health component. So that is suicidal threats. Those are welfare checks, behavioral health incidents. But in addition to that, like she started to talk about, was other agencies will sometimes respond to a call, and then they realize when they get there, there's a mental health component. It seems like the person's in crisis, so they will call us to assist. The goal of our team is to divert hospitalization, divert jail, and just to provide support and resources for people who are in crisis. So sometimes we're able to safety plan with somebody who's suicidal, and then we get them connected to ongoing services so that they can have ongoing support. What else?
Day to day, all of the other things we do, we just drive around. Generally, we spend a little bit of time in the office, which is around here. It's not a ton of space because our team has grown. So we get out in the patrol car and we just drive around the county, which is really new to me because I've been pretty much stuck inside of a city. I'd say small city at this point because I've been all over the county now. So I'm just out, for me, learning geography, scanning calls, and also helping patrol just with normal patrol calls. I try not to get too involved in this assignment because it takes her out of rotation. And the main point of this is to have a clinician ready to respond to those mental health calls. Education wise for me, I have a bachelor's, I have an associate's and bachelor's, nothing to do with law enforcement. I encourage anybody considering this profession not to take any law enforcement classes in college because most of what we learn is on the job. It's either in the 4-month academy that we have and 16 to 18 weeks of on-the-job training. Really, life experience is huge. It's really, really imperative to live before you become a police officer. You really need to experience life, all sorts of things. So because you respond to so many dynamic calls and so many different people, it's very diverse. It's really good to have that background. You know how to deal with different people, different situations. So I would say a degree is good. It's best, I think, to at least have a 4-year degree. You don't have to, but life experience is huge. So I would suggest that if you ever think about going into law enforcement. Also, since you're high school, you can also look into becoming a cadet with the police department, or the sheriff's office has the Explorer program. What's unique about the sheriff's office is that they have an Explorer program that does search and rescue, but they also have a separate law enforcement component where you can go ride with officers, similar to what we can do with cadets. Yeah, so what kind of problems do we solve? We'll share a couple of scenarios with you. We'll kind of give you the details of what led up to our involvement in these specific scenarios, and then we can ask you guys what you would think of doing at that point in time where we make our decision.
Okay. Before we start the scenarios, I just want to say too, if you're interested in the mental health field and this sort of work, crisis work as a mental health clinician sounds interesting to you, it is a little bit difficult right now as a social worker working with police. That's just the reality. We're coming from two different perspectives on things. So this is a really unique opportunity to learn about law enforcement and why they do the things that they do, and also give them an opportunity to learn about us and what we do. So, okay, as far as scenarios, I'll do the first one. Okay. So we got a call a couple weeks ago from an outside agency within the county. They had an individual who seemed to be having a mental health crisis. It was near like a strip mall. This person was outside yelling and screaming, but not to anybody in particular, just seemed really escalated, seemed like they were having a bad day. The people who worked in the mall were feeling, just because of the behavior, feeling scared of this person. And the owner of the property wanted this person to be trespassed from the property because they were scaring customers. The officers who asked us to come out weren't sure what to do because it also didn't seem like this person was understanding that they needed to leave. And so they were just wanting our help to see what we could do to offer this person.
So like we said, our job is to divert from jails and hospitals. Sometimes we can't stop from diverting from hospitals. So, and I don't take people to jail. Generally, we have other officers get involved with that. So we don't, we're not associated, our team is not associated with taking people to jail. So when we go on a scene, we do those things. We assess for safety. We see if we can come up with a safety plan somehow to ensure that, you know, the person is safe, the community is safe, and that they can get the resources in time for them. Or we divert to the hospital where they can be safe for a period of time until they can stabilize, or they go to jail. In this scenario, we had the outside agency officers there considering trespass charges. They recognized that this was a mental health issue, and that's why they brought us in to figure out if we can divert from jail and come up with a better solution for this person. When we arrived, she was very escalated, screaming, talking to somebody who was not there, actively getting in a fight with this person that was not there. It was very concerning because there were passersby going to and from stores. They were scared to go into certain stores where she was near, fearing that she might attack them. So just coming on scene to that, what do you think are some good steps or good things that you would think about as you enter this scenario, and maybe kind of do you have an idea of what you might do in this situation? Are they going to respond via video, or are they going to do it through chat?
I think a lot of students feel comfortable typing it in the chat. So students, if you want to,
they like the chat. Does anybody have any ideas what our best or what some good steps would be going into this?
Maybe while they're thinking about that, it looks like there are a couple of questions. How many teams do we now have on MHRT?
Good question.
One of the questions. Yeah.
So we have me and Heather. That's one. We work from 8 to 6 at 11:30. So Sunday through Wednesday, that's us. The other team, Sunday through Wednesday, we have 2 come on at 11:30. So that's Brad and Jason. And then we have Laura and Brian.
And Brad's a Beaverton officer.
Yes, Beaverton's also joined the team. So is South City. South City's encompasses Tigard, Tualatin, and Sherwood. They all share a clinician. So there's one officer per agency that shares a clinician. They just rotate their days with her. So yeah, so we're multi-agency now. So Sunday through Wednesday, we have teams covering 8 to 9:30, and that's 3 teams. We also have another deputy that is on the team that does not have a clinician. He's more in a training position for us. Also able to take clinicians if, say, I take the day off or somebody else does. He can kind of flex his schedule to help us out. Wednesday through Saturday, we have Keith and Julianne, and we have Deputy Huey. He does not have a clinician right now. We're working on that within the last couple of weeks. We're trying to find somebody for him. So Keith and Julianne work 11:30 to 9:30, and Deputy Huey works 1 to 11. And we used to be 1 to 11 Sunday through Wednesday, but we switched to the day shift hours mainly to test it out and to help with some unexpected family changes that just kind of better fit our schedules.
So it looks like you did get a couple of scenario answers. It says, just make sure that everyone is safe and wait until the person is calming down and not shouting. Avery then said, for that situation, maybe approach them calmly and try to get them to breathe. Evergreen Middle School said, we think you should be aware of your surroundings and approach slowly and calmly.
Good.
Aiden says, attempt to calm them down and try to understand what they believe they see and find solutions for that situation. Angelina says, would you try to talk to them to de-escalate their situation and help them to calm down?
Those are all very, very good points. And generally that's exactly what we try to do. We enter into a situation slowly, just kind of assessing what's actually going on, how this person is reacting to themselves and to others. And that's what we did. We talked to the officers on scene, kind of got the information from them. This person has, created some calls for service in the past with similar behavior, but this was different today. or that day, sorry. And so yeah, we did attempt to talk to her. That is basically our first step. So
Mhm. So we attempted for quite a while to try to see if we could de-escalate her. She was in a space where she wasn't able to do that, just given her symptoms and what was happening. So at that point, we kind of stepped back and tried to problem solve because we were concerned about the community safety. And we also know just from past experiences with this person that sometimes they can get, they do kind of carry out what they're seeing or what they're hearing. So there has been some violence in the past. So we know historically that's the case. And given that, we weren't able to de-escalate her, we decided that taking her to the hospital would be the best, the safest for her and for the community that day. So that's what we did. We took her to the hospital.
we made the decision, but then the next step is how do we get her to comply with us without using use of force? It's the last resort for us. We do not want to get in a fight with anybody over going to the hospital. We do our best to talk them through that and just let them know this is what's going to happen. I'm not an officer that sugarcoats anything. I just tell people straight up what's going to happen. I kind of, if I have the ability to give them options, give them some control over how it's going to happen, I will do that. But this person, it took a little bit of time because she was still going through the reality that she was experiencing, that somebody was on her back. I was trying to attack her. She's fighting back with that person that doesn't exist. So us to approach at that point in time probably wasn't the safest. So we kind of let her kind of run that course. She calmed down on her own eventually, started picking up some of her things. Where she was at, she was behind a gate that, behind like a wire fence that had a gate that entered into, an enclosed foyer for other businesses. So for us to go into that gate, it kind of just put us in a bad position. But once she calmed down, I felt comfortable enough just to kind of walk in and look around. And, I just tried to have a conversation with her. Like, hey, do you need help picking your things up? Is that your stuff over there? Just kind of get her to engage with us, and it gives me an idea of where she's at. And she was calm with me. She walked past me, was comfortable with that. And when she approached the gate, another officer kind of slipped in on her right side and I'm on her left. And we both just grabbed her arms just quickly and kind of held her there just so she knew this is what was going to happen. And she didn't give us any problems at that point. So it worked out really, really well for us just to have the patience, just assess, just take the time. That's something that our team has, the ability to do. We're not a patrol officer that just has to answer call to call to call to call and just have to get stuff done. We can take that extra time to work things out to where it's not, becoming a use of force issue. So, yep, we eventually we put her in handcuffs. Generally, we do put, especially potentially violent people, in handcuffs, even for what we call a director's custody.
Which is I have the ability to take somebody to the hospital if I believe that they are at imminent risk to themselves or others. It's the ability to take them to the hospital even if they don't want to go. So,
and she has the ability to direct me, a police officer, to do that. So she can say, you have to do that. So yeah, she advised she's going to take her on a director's custody. And then we formulated that plan, got her in handcuffs safely, got her to the car safely, into the car and up to the hospital. And we had no other issues with her, which was pretty fortunate considering how escalated she was when we first arrived.
I think that pointed out exactly one of the best benefits of the duality of this team is the fact that one side has the ability to see if there's possible previous arrests, and the other side gets to see HIPAA information that could not be shared otherwise, with a normal outreach team, they may not have access to that HIPAA information, or they may not have access to that arrest record. And so really having all that knowledge joined together, I think, is one of the most really unique things about this type of the team. There's a couple more questions that came in. I know, Heather, you answered the why you went into this field question that Mrs. Doolittle and Levi put in the question, but for our officer, it's also, Tracy, there's an additional question that Tyler put in, which is, what is it like being an officer? I've heard good and bad stories and want to hear your take on it.
There's a lot to say about that. I've been a police officer for 14 years, so I've seen the job that I went into 14 years ago is significantly different than today. Back when I was a young cop, it was go, arrest, dig, be very proactive, looking for crime. Generally, a lot of positive support for law enforcement, even nationwide. And I'm a different type of officer. So when I became an officer, I have to point this out because I had some difficulties initially, because I wasn't one of those traditional type A, go type of officers that just dig. I've always been a person that likes to spend time on calls. If there's some extra, if I have extra time, or if I feel like spending an extra hour on a call will help solve a problem down the road, maybe possibly prevent more calls from occurring, I will spend that extra time. So it didn't really fit into the formula of what police work was back then. But after about 5 years of being an officer, I started feeling that shift where it was becoming more acceptable to spend that time. Statistics weren't a big focus. So I felt like I had a lot of leeway and a lot of support from different supervisors that I fell into that allowed me to do that. And I started enjoying the job a lot more. And I started focusing a lot of my time on like mental health calls, kid calls, DHS calls, where I could spend that time and make those connections with the community. Being a police officer has changed me quite a bit in a lot of different ways, but one of the things is I'm very introverted, and this job is extremely difficult. She's introverted too, so we're a perfect pair. So it's being an officer and being introverted is very difficult. I had a coach when I was in FTEP, which is field training. It's a field training program where you're teamed up with another officer, senior officer, that teaches you this job. I was very quiet. This first phase, we had 3 different phases. This first phase, I would just go to calls and just kind of watch, because that's just what I do. And that's just not what you can do as an officer. You have to talk to people. He pulled me aside at one point. He's like, you do realize if you want to do this job, you are going to have to talk to people. And it kind of opened my eyes, like, I got to do something. So it took me several years to get used to that. Now it's, I put this on, super easy to talk to people. It drains me after 40 hours of doing this, but on my weekends, I just like to be at home. I like to be with my kids, my family. I don't answer the door. I don't usually answer phone calls. It's just how I am. But when I come to work, I'm rested and ready to do this for another 40 hours. We all know there's been some changes the last couple of years, especially 2020. Very difficult for law enforcement. That's a whole other conversation. Law enforcement is adapting and it's changing again. This job is no longer what it was 14 years ago, and it never will be. I'm still young enough to adapt to that, and I'm okay with the way that the direction is heading, willing to take that on. It is very difficult to find people willing to go into this profession at this point because of the national spotlight, the pressures of doing the right thing all the time, being afraid to make mistakes. Not everybody wants to have, deal with public ridicule. In certain parts of the country, it's very difficult to be a police officer. It's difficult to find somebody to raise their hand and say, I'm willing to do that. I'm very thankful for everybody that I work with that has decided to stick with this, because, I can say every person I worked with is worthy of their uniform and worthy of the trust of the communities that they serve. So I'm very thankful working for Hillsborough, and especially within Washington County. I think we have a very high level of support. So I think it's a lot easier for us to relax a little bit, just do our job the right way, the way we have been doing it, and continue building trust with the community one call at a time. It's all we can do. And this is part of it, reaching out to kids and kind of just making that connection on that level. So I love it. There's days that are really, really difficult depending on the calls that we respond to. I've seen some horrible things, been a part of some horrible things, but I've also been a part of some really great things, and those things are what keeps me going, just helping people and doing what I can do every day to make a day better for somebody else or ease that burden.
I think you just answered Bella's question, which is what is the most important thing about this job for you, meaningful and emotional. And then Avery asked something similar along the same lines. What is the most surprising part of being on MHRT for the two of you?
I likely would have a different perspective on police if I wasn't in this job. I mean, I understand it differently than I probably would if I didn't work with them day to day. I think that's the most surprising. It's not surprising anymore because I've been here a while, but
You see law enforcement differently when you start working with us.
Yeah.
It is true that this profession can be insular. It's different than how normal citizens operate. Police have to operate differently, and it's really difficult for a lot of people to really understand why we do the things that we do, because it's based off a lot of historical information and training, and it's constantly changing for us. So I just ask, if you see something that happens in front of you or in the news, just step back and say, what else was going on? Because a lot of the things that you read in the news, some are inaccurate, and a lot of the stuff that happened on calls in general are not reported into the news outlets. So, and if there's something that we do that just doesn't seem right, then just ask yourself, why is that? Find out why, ask questions.
And I'll go ahead and add in the chat, Hillsborough and Washington County Sheriff's Office, and I believe in Beaverton as well, have community academies regularly. Often you have to be 18 and over to partake in those, but there often is also videos that may coincide that anyone can watch on our YouTube channels or our community channels. So I'm going to put the Hillsborough one in the chat. That's coming up. I think you can start registering now for it, but it's in March. And then we just had the Sheriff Showcase here at Washington County Sheriff's Office. You guys can watch all those videos and see kind of the day in the life of a jail deputy. We also talked to the mental health clinician that works in the jail. So there's several different mental health positions, including also homeless outreach is starting to really expand to those fields as well. And so I'll put those in the chat. I got a couple more for you guys, but we have another question from Angelina. Would you choose this career if you could make the decision again? And that's for both of you.
Okay. Good question. This was not my number one job. I fell into police work. I went to several different colleges. I started at a university in Seattle. I moved to Walla Walla, did 2 years at a community college, played basketball, finished out at Portland State. And during some of the summers, I worked in Montana as a wildland firefighter. Absolutely loved it, fell in love with that. I was too young to really understand that I could really make that a career. Looking back, I probably would have gone that route just because of how much I loved what I did. But I'm loving what I'm doing right now. I don't 100% love it, but I enjoy it, and I'm happy that I made the decision to do it. It kind of fell into my lap after college. I just needed it. Basically, every college person, after you graduate, you're looking for a job, any opportunity to get in the work field. I actually started in records at Hillsborough Police right out of college. So I was a record specialist for 2.5 years. And I knew growing up with 3 brothers on a farm in Idaho, like I didn't belong in an office. And I had a lot of encouragement just to apply to be a police officer because I could be outside, I can be doing things, I wouldn't be tied down to an office. It's just not my type of environment, which was also appealing as a wildland firefighter. So I did it. I applied only to Hillsborough Police. I figured if I'm going to do it, I'll do it for this agency. I got it first try, which isn't always the case for a lot of people. Felt very fortunate, and I haven't regretted any decision that I've made since then. So,
I love this job. Like I mentioned earlier, my initial goal when I got my master's was to do outpatient therapy, and I could not imagine doing that right now. I mean, that's also a great opportunity to support somebody through change over time. And this work is different because you're helping somebody in the moment and oftentimes on their worst day. And there's something rewarding about that too. So yeah, I couldn't imagine like sitting in an office and no,
like we are right now.
yeah, right, right.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're thinking financially,
So
not the best in nonprofit work.
it's
It's a true calling.
right.
Has
So
to be.
my employer is community mental health, which typically just the pay isn't the greatest. So there is that to consider. Not that with my degree though, with social work, there's opportunities everywhere. So you can, if I chose to get a higher paying job somewhere else, I absolutely could, but
Another call, it says on average, how many calls do you take a day? It depends on the day. Like Sundays, generally pretty quiet. Sometimes they can hit pretty quickly. It's like sometimes I'm texting her, I'm calling or texting her saying, hey, we have a call, we need to go as soon as I get there. She'll meet me down at the car. We won't even come up to the office at all, and we'll take off. And we might be out all day just going call to call. Sometimes we'll be on a mental health call and we could have two other agencies request our services. So it's a lot of juggling. Some days you do 5, 6, 7 calls a day sometimes, which, some of those take a lot of time, along with all the paperwork that goes along with it. So, and then some days you can take 1 call, and then those days are pretty boring. That's when, especially recently, I go out and look for easy patrol calls just to go help normal patrol out and take some of that off their plate. Things that it's not going to take her out of service for a long period of time. Some of the paperwork that we have to do, usually I write a report every time we meet a new person that's new to MHRT. I write a report every time somebody that we've encountered before changes their behavior, what we call their baseline behavior, their normal behavior that we've always observed from them. If that changes, we need to notate that, especially if there's any officer safety information. And obviously we write reports every time we take somebody into custody for a director's custody. What are the typical calls you get?
Suicidal threats, welfare checks, and BHIs.
Yeah, they're labeled BHIs, so behavioral health incidents.
Which a lot of times that means we'll take it or we're requested because it's behavioral health. A lot of times that is, say, an older person who has dementia and is escalated, or family's concerned about them, which isn't really mental health, but it's also, we're probably the best fit for to respond to that sort of call, even though that's not necessarily mental health.
I took a call like that the other day. I didn't have Heather with me. And so I was trying to take, just patrol calls during that day, but there was a welfare check that came in. It was a 96-year-old male that I think started hallucinating and wasn't sleeping, and wife was concerned and wanted him taken to the hospital. So I ended up going. I didn't take anybody else with me just because didn't want to overwhelm both of them, and we got him to the hospital. It was voluntary. He agreed to go, so it was the best solution for that. Didn't write a report because it wasn't really anything that our team is really going to encounter with them again. It's more of a medical dementia issue at that point. So welfare checks, concerned family members, friends call in, hey, I have this friend that I haven't heard from in a week. I'm really concerned. This just happened in their life. They're not texting, they're not posting on social media. I'm really concerned that, something's wrong. Can you go check on them? That can be a call that we can go on with, sometimes with patrol, depending on how dire the information is. If it's really, really serious, we'll take a patrol unit with us just in case something turns out negative. What other questions?
If you're in the middle of a call and get a call that's more important, what do you do? Well, when we're assigned to a call, that's our call. If we get a request, sometimes we'll get a request from another agency or it doesn't realize, I guess, we're on a call. And then dispatch will just let them know, they're not available right now. Sometimes we'll take a phone call if we're in the middle, if they just need, say Beaverton is out with somebody and we're already on a call and they, ask if the maitre d' is available. Sometimes we'll take a phone call and see if we can help over the phone if we're on another call. It doesn't happen very often that there's something, it has happened, but it doesn't happen very often where there's something we have to go to leave the call. Typically we're with other officers too. It's not just the two of us. So if we need to leave or if they need to leave, usually if there's a more important call, it has to do with, patrol. Yeah. So they would be the ones that would leave the call.
Generally, we have other teams working. So especially when our 11:30 teams come on today, if we're on a call, maybe they're not paying attention to the calls like some of us do at times. We just go back and forth where we're at during the day. And if we're getting a request, or say Hillsborough calls me directly on my cell phone, which they do a lot, just because I'm accessible to them. And we might be on another call for a different agency. I'll tell them, hey, I can't respond, but I will get another team out there, and then we'll contact the other team via the clinician or the deputy or the officer and see if they can dispatch out to Hillsborough. So we can problem solve that way too.
Yeah. Do you have to be good at writing? So
yes,
yeah,
especially
there's a lot of writing involved. And it's really important that I write good assessments on somebody so that the next time that they're contacted, by another team, because that happens frequently. We see people multiple times, maybe not within a week, but maybe over the years. It's important for the next person to be able to go back and get an accurate picture of because that's important, like past contacts and what's going to be helpful to this person. Just things that would be helpful, in contacting somebody. So yes, you do a lot of writing.
So police work, it's very important as well. We can take theft calls that have no suspect information. Somebody stole my bike. Those are usually like a paragraph or two long. There's not a lot of information, and it's very easy to write those. Don't need a ton of skills other than you need to form complete sentences, complete thoughts in a paragraph, normal writing stuff. But when you get into those more complex investigations, even outside of MHRT, say you take a sexual assault case, or say a child neglect or a child abuse case that you'll be writing pages on, and you have to be able to write notes as you go through that investigation and then put that into a police report that makes sense. It has to make sense to the reader, and the reader is not just your supervisor. It's going to be the district attorney that's prosecuting the case. It's going to be a defense attorney. It's going to be the suspect. It's going to be anybody that requests that report. It could be news media that requests that report. So anything you write in a police report will be read by so many more people. It's the potential of that. And to make a really solid case in court, you have to be thorough in your police reports, and has to be extremely accurate. What is the most important skill to have for this job? What is it in your opinion, after everything that we've talked about? What do you think is the most important skill? And as you guys type that, what should high school and or middle school students do to get ready for this career? Well, for me, time management is huge. You need to be responsible for yourself, and you need to be accountable for your actions and what you do. You have to have integrity. You need to really start working on that now, making good choices, good decisions, even when you're faced with peer pressure. Maybe you want to, something's more fun than doing something mundane, but it's going to get you ahead further in life. You make that choice. Integrity is huge. Basically, that's just doing the right thing when nobody's looking. It's just making good decisions. Stay in school. Do your best in school. If your best is C's, then strive for that. If that's as far as you can get and you're doing your best, that's all I'm going to ask of my kids. I'm not going to expect straight A's for my kids. I will expect their best. Accept your faults, accept that you're going to make mistakes. And the biggest thing from making a mistake is learning from it. Learn to write, learn to be on time, learn to do all of that just life stuff. And then life experience.
I don't have anything to add to that. That was
Okay,
good.
it's just general stuff I think would be useful in any job that you would look for. You'd become outstanding to other applicants in jobs down the road if you can demonstrate those skills, and you have a willingness to learn and a willingness to be taught. Being coachable, being teachable is huge. You'll learn that in sports. If you're in sports, you'll be very successful, even having all those skills in sports. So that crosses all jobs, all professions, sports, anything that you do in life. If you have those skills, then I think you'll be okay. Logan, yes. Liberty High School, yes. Communication, this is our best tool. Being able to talk to somebody is critical with our role. It's critical even as a police officer, clinician. That's, they don't have all the tools that we have to deal with that. So that is their number one tool, is communication is the most important. Patience, I think, is close to that. Just being, I wouldn't say laid back, not everybody's laid back, but just being calm, being patient, and having learning the ability to talk to people and to listen to people. Listening is huge.
And to be humble. This isn't, I still come across situations where I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I mean, it's, there's never like a perfect answer for anything. So just knowing that you don't know everything. But I definitely agree that communication is the most important.
Is the job outlook percent high? What does that mean? Cody, can you help me?
Yeah, do you guys want to clarify on your question on that one, Levi, Miss Doolittle?
Yeah, what we mean is there a high percentage of like jobs available? Like, is there a good outlook for people that want to be in this field?
Absolutely. We have a huge shortage of clinicians. We have a shortage of police officers, especially over the last 2 years. We've had a lot of police officers leave for early retirements because the profession is changing. I believe that, the closer you are to retirement, especially if you're really close and the job is changing, it's hard to adapt to that, especially if you've been doing the job for 30 years before that, 20 years before that. It abruptly changes. I think it's really hard for those people to adapt. So they look for early retirements. Some people just reassess, like a lot of people in the country during COVID, they reassess, is it really worth going to work? Is it better for me to work from home, be with my kids, be with family, doing something else in life? I think there's several, there's a lot of police officers that have reassessed where they're at in their life and whether this is what their calling should be for the remainder of their working time. So yeah, obviously Portland has a lot of shortage. I think they're like 200 officers down. So It used to be where we used to have so many applicants. I mean, it was a very, very low percentage that you would actually get the job. Now, not so much. We don't get as many applicants, don't get as many quality applicants. And I don't see us lowering our standards at all, because I think that would hurt the profession. So we just kind of, sometimes, if we're hurting for people, we kind of limp along until we wait for those right candidates to come along, and hope more come along that are willing to put the uniform on and willing to do clinician work. It's a lot of work on their part, a lot of education, a lot of, just to get a license, it takes forever. It seems like that's not something that I have to do. So yeah, it's a good job outlook right now, if you want to get into it. Did the pandemic change some of your routine? Is that routine at home or routine at work? I'm gonna just guess work. It changed it for everybody at home. So yes, it did, especially at the height of COVID last year, when we didn't know a lot about the disease, how it was transmitted, how transmissible it was. So yeah, that really did change the way we did our job. So I was on patrol at that time. We were required to wear glasses, masks, like N95 masks, gloves. If we went to a death investigation in a house that potentially had COVID or was confirmed COVID, we had to don whole outfits to protect us. We don't necessarily have to do that anymore. We were told, in a combination of COVID and everything that happened out of George Floyd, it seemed like the public wanted less contact. So I think law enforcement in general backed off quite a bit. We were told to take a lot of our calls via phone. So we weren't having a lot of in-person contact. If there were calls that sometimes we didn't respond to certain calls. So yeah, it really, really changed. We did a lot less proactive police work, a lot less traffic stops, which I think has really gone into the egregious driving that we see these days. I mean, it's gotten a lot worse than it was pre-pandemic, just because we were not doing a lot of that for months. So I think it allowed people the leeway to kind of do what they want. So also, a lot of you guys don't know, the jail changed a lot of their protocols. There's a lot of crimes that we cannot take people to jail for right now. We issue citations. So somebody trespassing on your property, somebody breaks something of yours, somebody steals something of yours, they're going to get a citation. They don't go to jail. So I think that's changed a lot of people's behaviors. They're like, oh, I just get a piece of paper instead of going to jail. That's really changed a lot of our police work, because we just don't have the tools to change behavior in that respect. So that's been kind of frustrating for us. How's it changed for you?
Well, aside from just simple accommodations like wearing a mask and stuff, my job didn't really change that much. I mean, we still have to respond to calls and see people. So
did you do it as much on MHRT last year? Or were you doing more by phone?
Well, I think the hope was that we could problem solve over the phone, but that didn't last very long, because people just needed to be seen. So I think that was the hope, and that just didn't last very long. So we were seeing people.
I apologize for repetition, but could you repeat what college degree you needed for your career?
So I have a master's in social work. There are other clinicians here who have masters in counseling. So they're licensed. So it's licensed professional counselors. We have similar jobs here, and maybe I'm biased, but social work gives you way more opportunities. It's not, just LPCs can do therapy basically, or crisis work, but social work, you can, if you were to get your master's in social work, you can do actual social work in so many different platforms and different jobs. So it's more diverse, more opportunities, I think. So
and if you're asking about mine, I don't think a degree is required. It depends on the department. Some departments have different guidelines for applicants, but us no. But if you do have degrees, associate, bachelor's, master's, and on, you're more attractive to employers. Just having a degree shows that you can do time management, you can do your assignments on time, you know how to read and write, you know how to critically think, you can do all those things. Those are the skills that we talked about earlier that translate into anything that you do in life. So getting a degree shows that you are successful in that. So the further you go in school, you just become more attractive to any potential employers.
And then have you ever felt your job putting you in danger or even posing a threat to your life? So why this works is that keeps me safe.
I'm her bodyguard.
Yeah. The idea, I know it's well-intentioned and it would be awesome if it worked, having social workers go out without police. Sounds good in theory, but there have been several dicey situations where I probably would have been hurt if I didn't have an officer with me. That's just the reality of it. You're walking into calls that, 911 calls that you don't know what you're going to see until you get there. So I've never really felt in danger, but there have been some dicey situations. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one person
Yeah.
in the car, we did have an incident. We responded to a suicide threat. She had told somebody that she, I don't know if it's gonna be brutal for you guys, had cut herself. And so there was concerns about her safety, and she gave enough information to kind of give us the general area of where she's at. So Heather and I went up and we just did an area check for this person near her house. Found her not too far away. She was just sitting in the car, just sitting there, wasn't moving. I mean, she was awake and everything, just sitting in her driver's seat. And so I'm like, oh, we'll just go up and check on her. We both walked up on the car, nonchalant, just totally just cool, laid back. Hey, how's it going? Hey, we have some concerns about you. And then I started really taking in what I was seeing. We started seeing some blood. Obviously there were some medical issues that she needed attention for. I called for medical, and as soon as I did that, she started stabbing herself basically in her throat, right in front of me, right in front of Heather. And I had to jump through the window basically to try and stop her. And I knew that wasn't going to work. I didn't have leverage, had to open the door and basically hold her down until I could get more help there. So just because we go into a situation, it seems really calm, seems okay, not necessarily safe for her to walk up in the car and experience that, because it'd be extremely dangerous for her to be on her own to do that. Just as it's dangerous for me. So things can change very, very quickly for us. Even if it's just the two of us and we're non-threatening. I mean, this uniform is threatening to some people, but we just never know what we're gonna run into when we're out there. So any other questions? Did we answer most of the things that we needed to answer? And then some? How do you balance family life and career? Since I had kids, families first. You'll find a lot of officers do it, a lot of different assignments. I've been on patrol for 13 years because of my kids. Unfortunately, I split from their father, so I only get to see my kids half the week. And so my days off are everything. So my work schedule is completely built around my time with them. And I do not do overtime at all on my days off, unless it's very unique, or I talk to my kids and ask them if it's okay if I do it for certain things. So family is absolutely number one. Work is number two. When I'm at work, it's a priority, but if anything happens with my family, I leave. So, yeah. Same for you, I would.
Yeah,
I
it's
would
same
guess.
for me. And it's, you learn to keep stuff at work and don't take it home. It's really important to learn to do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
Any other questions? No. Anything, Cody? Anything?
I don't see any more in there. I'll put my info back in the chat again. If anybody comes up with questions they're thinking about later going through all this, then definitely reach out to me or back to Goldilocks and she'll get those questions to us and we'll get the team to answer those. It's an expanding team, so you can follow either Hillsborough or our team at Washington County Sheriff's Office to see what opportunities are coming available as we have those community academies and you want to have more insight and hopefully maybe in the spring or summer we can actually start doing ride-alongs and other opportunities where you can actually come in and see the inner workings and actually meet with deputies or officers or our clinicians and just see what those opportunities are. I think you kind of hit everything. I think those top ones, that communication skills, life skills, having diverse life experiences, those are the big ones that we hear the most from our recruitment team as well. Just being able to work with all different walks of life with people, because you're working with a diverse community in Washington County. So I think you guys got all the questions. Goldilocks, is there anything else that you can think of?
I think we got everything. It was like a lot of information and I think kids are really learning. Oh, okay, we'll get
For
back.
you
It
guys,
was
I
just-
think.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a lot of information, good information.
Good.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you, Cody, for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And for just so everyone knows if they're still on, so I do community outreach and safety education. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have questions in the community too for those unincorporated areas I can help out. So thanks so much. We'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.
All right. And for students who need help